Greetings. I'm Pastor Gary, and this is my weekly message for the weekend of July 4th, which is the sixth Sunday after Pentecost. Dear friends, of course, this weekend, much of our nation and many of us will be embroiled in celebrations and festivities that are marking the day we call the founding of the United States of America. The date's associated with the signing of the Declaration of Independence, July 2nd, 1776. But my part as a pastor is not to lecture on the history of the nation, but on the meaning of Jesus Christ and his call to us all that we follow him. That's what I do as a pastor. And so I find myself struggling with what following Jesus means in the midst of festivities like Independence Day. Now that might be confusing to you, so let me attempt to clarify why I find so much difficulty in addressing and in simultaneously in leaving unremarked a national holiday. So I'm going to start by using the words of a man who's wiser and more eloquent than I at length, because I think that they illustrate the connection of this day, Independence Day, to some of the best and the worst aspects of our own history as a nation, and how both of these things, the best and worst aspects of the nation, are intertwined with the conduct and the proclamation of the church here on this continent. The quote is from the speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" by Frederick Douglass in the year 1852. I commend the whole thing to you in full. It's a wonderful speech, and I know there are a variety of places where it's being read this weekend, so I commend that to you. But here I'm taking out specifically a place where Douglass addresses Christianity and the church. He's talking about the Fugitive Slave Act. Now, the Fugitive Slave Act was a law that made it necessary to and possible to pursue fugitive slaves across state lines. So states could no longer say, you may be a slave in Maryland, but not in New Jersey, right? With the passing of the Fugitive Slave Act, it was now law that you could be chased anywhere within the national borders as a runaway slave. And Douglass was speaking against this in this speech. He specifically talks about how it destroys this whole argument of states' rights, because it turns out we don't care about states' rights as long as we can have slaves, right? It makes the whole nation a slave nation, and it totally infringes upon any state's ability to choose its position about slavery. And so Douglass continues, and this is all a quote. "I take this law to be one of the grossest infringements of Christian liberty, and if the churches and ministers of our country were not stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent, they too would so regard it. At the very moment that they are thanking God for the enjoyment of civil and religious liberty, and for the right to worship God according to the dictates of their own consciences, they are utterly silent in respect to a law which robs religion of its chief significance and makes it utterly worthless to a world lying in wickedness. Did this law concern the mint, anise, and cumin, abridged the right to sing psalms, to partake of the sacrament, or to engage in any of the ceremonies of religion, it would be smitten by the thunder of 1,000 pulpits. A general shout would go up from the church, demanding repeal, repeal, instant repeal, and it would go hard with that politician who presumed to solicit the votes of the people without inscribing this motto on his banner. Further, if this demand were not complied with, another Scotland would be added to the history of religious liberty, and the stern old Covenanters would be thrown into the shade. A John Knox would be seen at every church door and heard from every pulpit, and Fillmore would have no more quarter than was shown by Knox to the beautiful but treacherous Queen Mary of Scotland. The fact that the church of our country, with fractional exceptions, does not esteem the fugitive slave law as a declaration of war against religious liberty implies that the church regards religion simply as a form of worship, an empty ceremony, and not a vital principle requiring active benevolence, justice, love, and goodwill toward man. It esteems sacrifice above mercy, psalm singing above right doing, solemn meetings above practical righteousness, a worship that can be conducted by persons who refuse to give shelter to the houseless, to give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and who enjoin obedience to a law forbidding these acts of mercy is a curse, not a blessing to mankind. The Bible addresses all such persons as scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, who pay tithe of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. But the church of this country is not only indifferent to the wrongs of the slave, it actually takes sides with the oppressors. It has made itself the bulwark of American slavery and the shield of American slave hunters. Many of its most eloquent divines, who stand as the very lights of the church, have shamelessly given sanction of religion and the Bible to the whole slave system. They have taught that man may properly be a slave, that the relation of master and slave is ordained of God, that to send back an escaped bondman to his master is clearly the duty of all the followers of the Lord Jesus Christ, and this horrible blasphemy is palmed off upon the world for Christianity. For my part, I would say, welcome infidelity, welcome atheism, welcome anything in preference to the gospel as preached by those divines. They convert the very name of religion into an engine of tyranny and barbarous cruelty, and serve to confirm more infidels in this age than all the infidel writings of Thomas Paine, Voltaire, and Bolingbroke put together have done. These ministers make religion a cold and flinty-hearted thing, having neither principles of right action nor bowels of compassion. They strip the love of God of its beauty and leave the throng of religion a horrible, huge, repulsive form. It is a religion for oppressors, tyrants, man-stealers, and thugs. It is not that pure and undefiled religion which is from above, and which is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. But a religion which favors the rich against the poor, which exalts the proud against the humble, which divides mankind into two classes, tyrants and slaves, which says to the man in chains, stay there, and to the oppressor, oppress on. It is a religion which may be professed and enjoyed by all the robbers and enslavers of mankind. It makes God a respecter of persons, denies God his fatherhood of the race, and tramples in the dust the great truth of the brotherhood of man. All this we affirm to be true of the popular church and the popular worship of our land and nation, a religion, church, and a worship which, on the authority of inspired wisdom, we pronounce to be an abomination in the sight of God. In the language of Isaiah, the American church might well be addressed. Bring no more vain oblations. Incense is an abomination unto me. The new moons and Sabbaths, the calling of assemblies, I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even the solemn meaning. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hateth. They are a trouble to me. I am weary to bear them. And when ye spread forth your hands, I will hide mine eyes from you. Yea, when ye make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Cease to do evil, learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge for the fatherless, plead for the widow. The American church is guilty when viewed in connection with what it is doing to uphold slavery, but it is superlatively guilty when viewed in connection with its ability to abolish slavery. The sin of which it is guilty is one of omission as well as of commission. Albert Barnes but uttered what the common sense of every man at all observant of the actual state of the case will receive as truth when he declared that there is no power out of the church that could sustain slavery an hour if it were not sustained in it. Let the religious press, the pulpit, the Sunday school, the conference meeting, the great ecclesiastical, missionary, Bible, and tract associations of the land array their immense powers against slavery and slaveholding, and the whole system of crime and blood would be scattered to the winds. And that they do not do this involves them in the most awful responsibility of which the mind can conceive. In prosecuting the anti-slavery enterprise, we have been asked to spare the church, to spare the ministry. But how, we ask, could such a thing be done? We are met on the threshold of our efforts for the redemption of the slave by the church and ministry of the country in battle arrayed against us, and we are compelled to fight or flee. From what quarter, I beg to know, has proceeded a fire so deadly upon our ranks during the last 2 years as from the northern pulpit? As the champions of oppressors, the chosen men of American theology have appeared, men honored for their so-called piety and their real learning. The Lords of Buffalo, the Springs of New York, the Lathrops of Auburn, the Coxes and Spencers of Brooklyn, the Gannets and Sharps of Boston, the Deweys of Washington, and other great religious lights of the land have, in utter denial of the authority of him by whom the professed to he called the ministry, deliberately taught us against the example or the Hebrews and against the remonstrance of the apostles. They teach that we ought to obey man's law before the law of God. My spirit wearies of such blasphemy, and how such men can be supported as the standing types and representatives of Jesus Christ is a mystery which I leave others to penetrate. The words of Douglas concern the Church's majority support of slavery in defiance of its supposed allegiance to Jesus Christ. Over 150 years later, dear friends, are we not aware of many causes in which the Church is, to judge from what Christians bother to say in the streets or from the pulpits, still in support of many unjust laws and immoral government policies in defiance of its supposed allegiance to Jesus Christ? And isn't this now driven by many fears that we have for ourselves? We are afraid now to differ publicly even from something we know is wrong. We are afraid to offend those who hate and destroy our siblings. This is the only explanation I can find for our conduct, other than that having that great lie that our faith is supposed to be private. And having a private faith is like having secret citizenship. It does and means nothing until it is used in ways that affect the world and lives. Jesus Christ came into this world precisely to break us free from fear, shame, and powerlessness. I think we can handle stepping into the public square and telling the truth. And so this weekend, I leave you with this thought to share with me and with others. Meditate upon it. How does the person who is today in the most powerless, deprived, and abused situation see the Church? As siding with them or with their oppressor?